The salty sea breeze whipped through the air as the luxury yacht glided effortlessly over the glistening waves, its sleek hull cutting through the water with precision. To the crew, it was just another day on the water, another high-profile charter. But there was something different about this trip, something they didn't notice at first. Among the team, she blended in seamlessly, doing her job with quiet professionalism. Her uniform was crisp, her movements efficient, and her presence unremarkable. Also, they thought. As the hours passed, the crew went about their tasks, unaware that the woman in the background was more than just another face on the ship. She wasn't there for the luxury or the glamour. She had her own reason for being on board. The question was, what was it? Everything changed when, at the most unexpected moment, her name was called over the intercom. It was there, in bold letters on the crew roster, but it wasn't just her position that was listed. The yacht's name had been etched beside hers, revealing a connection no one had seen coming. The crew stared in shock, a ripple of disbelief spreading among them. How could someone like her, someone they thought was just part of the service team, have such a title? What was her real role? The yacht, known for its exclusivity, had a secret, one that no one saw coming. And as the crew's assumptions began to crumble, they realized that this was only the beginning. What had they gotten themselves into? Find out what happens next. The crew stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. For a moment, the usual hustle of the yacht faded into the background. The captain, who had been leading this charter for years, narrowed his eyes at the intercom system, double-checking the announcement. Her name again. His face, usually stern, tightened as he slowly turned towards the crew, a few muttered questions already rising in the air. "No one told me she was involved," the first mate whispered, his voice thick with confusion. The head stewardess, who'd been working alongside her all day, looked equally perplexed. They'd barely exchanged a word with her during the trip, assuming she was just another temp hired for the day, doing her job without fuss. But that was the thing about yachts like this. They were places of whispered conversations and carefully crafted appearances. Guests were used to the luxury, but they weren't always keen on getting too close to the people who served them. And for someone like her, someone so seemingly unremarkable, to have her name on the yacht, it was impossible to ignore. As the crew tried to make sense of the revelation, their eyes were drawn back to the woman, now standing quietly in the corner of the deck, her posture still composed, though there was a flicker of something else in her gaze. Was it uncertainty? Or was it something far more calculated? The captain cleared his throat, his voice cold as he addressed the crew. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he said, but his words only added to the tension hanging in the air. There was more to her story, something hidden just beneath the surface, and they had no choice but to find out what it was. But every question led to even more uncertainty, and with each passing moment, it felt like they were being drawn deeper into a web they didn't even know existed. What had they really gotten themselves into? The atmosphere aboard the yacht had shifted from one of calm professionalism to quiet unease. No one knew how to react. The guests, blissfully unaware of the brewing tension below deck, continued to enjoy their luxury retreat, sipping cocktails by the pool, laughing and chatting. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The first mate, Ben, found himself eyeing the woman more than was comfortable. Something about her seemed out of place, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. He'd seen her before, on other yachts, but never like this. No one had ever introduced her as anything more than part of the crew. What was she hiding? His thoughts raced as he leaned against the railing, contemplating whether he should confront her or simply let things unfold. Below deck, Emma, the head stewardess, was struggling with her own questions. She'd been with the company long enough to know when something was off, and this felt like one of those moments. The woman's arrival had been sudden, almost too sudden, and now, with her name tied to the yacht, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being kept in the dark. As she folded napkins in the galley, she glanced up, catching the reflection of the woman in the polished steel of the kitchen's door. She wasn't moving, just standing there, staring at the sea through a porthole. Emma's curiosity tugged at her, but she knew better than to get involved. It wasn't her place to question who had what role on the yacht. And yet, that same voice whispered again. Asterisk, what if this was more than it seemed? Asterisk. Back on the deck, the captain had retreated to his quarters, attempting to sift through old records and contracts. The name on the yacht's roster was genuine, no mistake there. But what if it wasn't just about ownership? What if the woman was tied to something much bigger, something no one could have predicted? As the hours passed, the unsettling feeling only grew stronger. Everyone on board had their secrets, but this felt different. It wasn't long before the crew realized that the yacht had become a far more dangerous place than they'd ever thought. The night had fallen, and the yacht seemed to move slower now, the moonlight casting a cold glow over the water. The gentle lapping of the waves against the hold only added to the eerie quiet that had taken over the ship. Below deck, the air felt thick with tension. The crew had gone into their usual evening routines, but there was a palpable undercurrent of discomfort, like everyone was waiting for something to break. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the woman. She'd disappeared into the lower levels hours ago, and no one had seen her since. She had a nagging feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. It wasn't just the woman's name on the yacht. There was something far more deliberate in her silence, something hidden in her every move. It was as if she were playing a game, and the crew were the pawns. Meanwhile, Ben stood watch near the aft deck, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had already checked the crew roster again, but it still made no sense. There was no explanation for how someone so unassuming could have this kind of connection. The captain's recent absence had only deepened the mystery. Why hadn't he told anyone? Why keep this secret for so long? As Ben paced back and forth, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind him. He spun around, his heart racing. There, standing in the shadows, was the woman. She was staring at him, her face unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, an intensity that made him shiver. She took a step forward, and for the first time, her voice broke the silence. "I think it's time you all knew the truth," she said quietly, her words hanging in the air like a warning. Ben opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the yacht jolted. The lights flickered. Something was terribly wrong. The yacht rocked again, this time more violently. A sharp crack echoed through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal groaning under pressure. The crew scrambled, instinctively rushing to their stations, but there was no clear source for the disruption. The woman remained frozen, her eyes narrowing, as if she had anticipated the chaos. Ben took a step toward her, his pulse quickening. "What's happening? What did you do?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, toward the distant horizon, where the dark outline of another vessel could just barely be seen. It wasn't the usual marine traffic. This was something different, something intentional asterisk. "Look," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The yacht is compromised. There's no time to explain fully, but you need to trust me now." Ben was about to respond when the intercom crackled to life. The captain's voice, usually calm and authoritative, now sounded strained. "Everyone on deck now. We're under threat. I repeat, we're under threat." A chill ran down Ben's spine. What was happening? The yacht wasn't just drifting. It was being asterisk followed asterisk, and worse, asterisk targeted asterisk. He'd thought the woman was just a part of some private scandal, a rich owner hiding in plain sight. But now, it felt like the entire ship was caught in a much larger, much darker game. Emma rushed onto the deck, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Ben, the ship's systems, they're failing. It's like someone's hacked into the controls. We can't move." Before Ben could react, the woman stepped forward, meeting his gaze with a knowing look. "I wasn't just a crew member," she said. "I was the one who helped you all get on this yacht in the first place. Now, we need to survive what comes next." The tension on deck was suffocating. The yacht shuddered as the mysterious vessel closed in, its shadow looming over them. The woman, who had been so composed until now, finally let her guard slip. She moved toward the control panel with urgency, her fingers flying over the buttons, trying to regain control of the yacht's systems. Ben stood behind her, his heart pounding as he tried to make sense of the situation. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What do they want?" She didn't answer immediately, her concentration fixed on the panel. "They've been tracking this yacht for weeks," she muttered, her eyes flickering to the approaching ship. "It's not just about the yacht, it's about you." Ben felt his stomach twist. "Me? What do you mean?" Before she could explain, a loud crash rang through the ship. The distant vessel had launched something at them, something that hit the hull with a violent force. The yacht lurched and the lights flickered again, plunging them into temporary darkness. When they came back on, the crew scrambled to find any sign of what had just happened, but there was nothing. Suddenly, the woman turned to face Ben, her expression grim. "It's time to tell you everything." Her words cut through the chaos, but Ben didn't have time to process them. A crew member, breathless with panic, ran up to them. "They're boarding us," he shouted. Just as the first figures appeared on the yacht's deck, the woman took a deep breath, facing Ben. "I was never just part of the crew," she confessed. "I was hired to bring you here, to set this trap." Ben's mind raced, but before he could react, everything went black. The yacht exploded in a deafening roar, the force throwing everyone off their feet. The last thing Ben saw was the woman's face, calm in the midst of the chaos, before the world around him shattered completely. The explosion sent a shockwave through the yacht, tearing through the hull with terrifying force. For a moment, everything was chaos, screams, smoke, and the violent cracking of wood and metal. Ben's body was flung across the deck, his mind spinning as he fought to stay conscious. When he finally opened his eyes, the world around him was unrecognizable. The yacht, once a gleaming symbol of wealth, was now a sinking wreck. The water was creeping up fast, and the once pristine luxury had turned into a nightmare. Somehow, he found his footing, his breath shallow as he scanned the scene. The crew members who had been with him were scattered, some unconscious, others clinging to life. But there was no sign of the woman. He stumbled through the debris, searching desperately. Had she survived? Then, as if answering his unspoken question, he saw her, standing at the edge of the wreckage, gazing out over the water. Her calm demeanor was unsettling. She wasn't even drenched from the explosion. She had been ready for this, prepared for the chaos that had unfolded. Ben's voice broke through the silence, trembling with anger and confusion. "Why? Why did you do this?" She didn't turn to him. Instead, she simply looked at the horizon, where the mysterious vessel was already retreating into the darkness, its purpose completed. "Because," she said quietly, her words chilling in the stillness, "you were always the target, but you never understood why." She paused, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "You were never meant to leave this yacht, Ben. None of you were." And with that, she stepped backward into the shadows, disappearing into the night as the yacht continued its descent beneath the waves. The story was over, but the mystery lingered, unanswered. The trap had been set, and the hunters had already won.